Part 1. Her father's voice had a way of filling every corner of the house, even the ones where sound shouldn't reach. It seeped through cracked doors and thin walls, crawled under the table and up the stairs, thick with whiskey and something older, resentment that had fermented for years. Each shout landed like a thrown bottle, even when nothing broke. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, fingers dug into the quilt her mother had stitched long before sickness carried her away, counting the spaces between his words and the slam of his fist against wood. The kitchen clock ticked too loud. Every second felt like a dare. She knew the pattern by heart. The bottle tipping, the gulp, the pause where he inhaled as if preparing to breathe fire. She'd learned when to stay silent, when to move, when to disappear. Tonight, though, the air felt tighter, sharper, like the house itself was holding its breath. His boots scraped the floorboards, and she flinched before the sound even finished forming. She rose quietly and crossed the room, easing the back door open inch by inch. Cold rushed in, clean and biting, carrying the smell of damp earth and cattle and the far-off sweetness of hay. The midnight fog lay thick over the land, rolling low across the fields like a living thing, swallowing the fences and softening the stars until the sky looked bruised. She wrapped her shawl tighter and stepped outside, letting the door click shut behind her with a careful finality. Out here, the shouting dulled to a distant, muffled roar, as if the fog itself was trying to protect her. She drew a long breath and another, but the tears came anyway, blurring the yard and the old barn until everything ran together. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth, stifling a sound she'd learned to keep small. Crying only made things worse inside. Crying was weakness. That was what he always said. Her boots sank slightly into the damp ground as she walked toward the fence, the fog wrapping her ankles, then her knees. The world felt smaller and bigger at the same time, smaller because she could barely see 10 steps ahead, bigger because for once there were no walls. She leaned against a fence post, cool and solid beneath her palms, and let her forehead rest there. Just get through the night, she whispered to herself, the way she always did. Dawn was a promise she clung to like a lifeline. Then she heard it, hooves, slow, measured, unmistakable. At first, she thought she was imagining it, her mind reaching for comfort the way it sometimes reached for her mother's voice. But the sound came again, steady, unhurried, cutting through the fog with a calm that felt almost deliberate. Her head lifted. The shouting from the house seemed to fall back, as if embarrassed by the intrusion of something gentler. A lantern glow bloomed in the mist, small at first, then brighter, bobbing softly with each step of the horse. The shape of a rider emerged, tall in the saddle, hat brim low, coat dark against the pale fog. He rode as if the night belonged to him, as if he trusted the ground beneath even when he couldn't see it. Her heart stumbled. Cowboys passed through sometimes, driving cattle or cutting across land with permission or apology. They were figures from the edges of her world, dusty, distant, free. This one slowed when he saw her, reins tightening just enough to bring the horse to a quiet stop a few paces away. "Evenin'," he said, his voice low and warm, carrying easily without forcing itself into the space. "Didn't mean to startle you." She swallowed, suddenly aware of her tear-streaked face, her shaking hands. Words lodged in her throat. He waited anyway, not filling the silence, not shifting impatiently in the saddle. The lantern light caught his eyes, kind and attentive, and something in her chest loosened. "You're out late," he added gently, not accusing, just noticing. The house behind her erupted with another muffled curse, and she flinched hard enough that the shawl slipped from her shoulders. The cowboy's gaze flicked past her to the dark shape of the house, then back to her face. His expression didn't harden, but it deepened, like he understood more than she'd said. He tipped his hat slightly, a small gesture of respect that made her blink. "I was ridin' through," he said. "Saw the light on. Thought I'd check." Her name slipped from his mouth next, soft and careful, as if it were something fragile. Hearing it spoken like that, without anger, without demand, sent fresh tears spilling over. In the quiet between the fog and the fields, with the lantern glow warming the cold night, she realized she wasn't alone out here after all. Part 2. The fog seemed to thicken as she took a step closer, as if the night itself wanted to listen. Her throat tightened around words she'd buried so long they felt foreign, but the cowboy didn't rush her. He slid down from the saddle slowly, boots touching earth with a soft certainty, then set the lantern on the fence rail. Its light painted his face in gold and shadow, steady as his breathing. "I'm sorry," she said at last, the habit of apologizing rising automatically. "I shouldn't be out here. needed air. You don't owe me sorry, he replied, gentle but firm, like he meant it. Everyone needs air. That simple sentence broke something open. Her shoulders shook, and she turned her face away, ashamed of how easily the tears came now. They spilled anyway, hot and relentless, tracing paths down her cheeks. She pressed her sleeve to her eyes, but it only smeared the ache wider. He didn't step closer right away. He asked first, quietly, "May I?" She nodded, barely perceptible, and then his coat was around her shoulders, heavy and warm, smelling of leather, smoke, and rain. It felt like shelter. His hands were careful as he settled it, never lingering where they shouldn't, never claiming more than she offered. The house behind them groaned with another shout, sharper this time. Her body reacted before her mind. She stiffened, breath catching, eyes darting toward the door. The cowboy shifted then, just enough to place himself between her and the sound, broad shoulders blocking the view. He didn't touch her, but the message was clear. You're not facing it alone. I hear him, he said softly. But I'm right here. The words weren't heroic or loud. They didn't promise miracles. Still, her knees nearly gave out. She leaned into the fence, and he mirrored her stance beside her, close enough that their sleeves brushed. The fog curled around them, muting the world until it felt like there was only this small circle of light and breath. She found herself talking, haltingly at first, then faster, as if afraid she'd lose courage if she paused. She spoke of nights like this one, of bottles emptied and refilled, of fear that lived in her bones even when the house was quiet. She spoke of her mother, gone too soon, and of learning how to make herself small. She didn't look at him while she spoke, but she felt his attention like a steady hand at her back. He didn't interrupt, not once. When she faltered, he waited. When her voice broke, he didn't rush to soothe it away. He let her finish. When she finally ran out of words, the silence felt different, not empty, but held. You don't deserve any of that, he said, low and sure. None of it, she laughed weakly, a sound with no humor. Seems like I do. He turned to face her fully then, lantern light catching the seriousness in his eyes. No, he said, seems like you've been strong longer than anyone should have to be. Her breath hitched. She looked up at him at last, really looked. There was no pity there. No hunger either, just respect, and something steadier, care. Another shout cracked the night, closer this time, and she flinched again. Without thinking, she reached for him, fingers curling into the front of his coat. He froze for half a heartbeat, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. He lifted a hand slowly, stopping inches from her cheek. Is this all right? He asked. She nodded, tears blurring the lantern light into stars. His palm was warm against her skin, thumb brushing a tear away with a tenderness that made her chest ache. He leaned down, not claiming, not rushing, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so gentle it felt like a promise whispered rather than spoken. There was no force in it, only reassurance, only presence. She tasted salt and breath and the quiet truth that she mattered. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. You're not alone, he murmured. Not tonight. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she believed it. Part 3. The fog was thinning when she finally stepped back from the fence, still feeling the warmth of his hand linger on her cheek. The house loomed behind her like a wounded animal, silent for the moment, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way. She had always believed that the darkness inside those walls defined her nights, but now, standing in the cool air with the first hints of dawn brushing the horizon, she realized that some light could find its way even through the thickest fog. He didn't speak immediately, just watched her, giving her space to breathe, to understand that she had survived this night and could survive the next. His horse shifted beneath him, lantern swaying slightly, casting dancing shadows over the damp grass. She felt like she could breathe again, but with each inhale came the memory of her father's shouting in the years of bottled fear. For a moment, panic flared, quick and sharp, like fire licking her spine. She tensed, ready to flee or crumble, but he stayed. He stayed like the earth itself had risen to shield her. You don't have to go back in there, he said finally, voice calm and steady, the kind of calm that didn't need to explain itself. Not tonight, not alone. She swallowed hard, pressing her hands together, the shawl tangled around her fingers. I can't just leave, she whispered. It's my home, even if it doesn't feel like it. He nodded, understanding more than she could say. Then I'll wait, right here, until you're ready. And that's what he did. They stood together, wrapped in fog and lantern light, until the first blush of sun painted the horizon with muted golds and pinks. The night had been long, and she could still feel the trembling of her hands, the tight coil of fear in her chest, but something about his presence made it manageable. He didn't fix everything, didn't promise her father would change, didn't offer a solution she wasn't ready for. He offered himself as an anchor, and that was enough for now. When the shouting finally stopped, whether he had gone to sleep, or the bottle had run dry, or exhaustion had finally silenced him, she turned toward him. She noticed details she hadn't before. The faint lines of worry etched around his eyes, the set of his jaw, the way his hands rested lightly on the reins. He wasn't just a figure in the fog anymore, he was real, steady, a reminder that someone could be there without asking for anything in return. "Will you come back?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. He met her gaze, unwavering. "I'll come back," he said. "I can't promise tomorrow will be perfect, but I can promise I'll be there. When you need someone." Her lips quivered, and a small, fragile smile formed despite everything. She hadn't expected kindness. She hadn't expected patience or understanding. But somehow, here it was, as tangible as the fog curling around the fence posts. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe without bracing for a strike, like maybe she didn't have to endure alone anymore. He mounted his horse again slowly, giving her a chance to step away if she needed to. She didn't, not yet. She wanted to memorize the way he moved, the way his coat fell over the saddle, the way his eyes held hers one last time before the world swallowed him again. He lifted the reins, lantern swaying with him, and began to ride away. The fog shifted behind him, rising and falling like waves, and she watched the light of the lantern shrink into the distance, a solitary star guiding the path through uncertainty. When it disappeared entirely, she leaned against the fence post, fingertips tracing the rough wood, tasting the memory of the kiss against her lips. It hadn't saved her, didn't magically erase the fear that filled the house behind her, but it reminded her that salvation could come in small gestures, in a single night, from a person who showed up without asking for permission. Hope could arrive quietly, carried on hooves and whispered words, and she could hold on to it, even if the darkness lingered. The sun rose fully now, burning away the last wisps of fog, and the world seemed larger, more forgiving. She turned back to the house, the sound of distant morning stirring birds and the faint clatter of dishes inside. The shouting was gone for now, but she didn't feel trapped. She had something stronger than fear now, the knowledge that someone had chosen to stand with her, if only for a night, and that made all the difference. She whispered his name softly, a vow she didn't fully understand yet. "Thank you," and somewhere beyond the fog, she imagined him nodding, lantern swinging gently, riding toward another day, carrying with him the quiet promise that she wasn't alone, ever again. She stepped back into the yard, shoulders straight, breath even, carrying with her a fragile but unshakable truth. Darkness could be met, fear could be faced, and sometimes, the simplest acts of courage, like showing up, like a kiss in the midnight fog, could change everything.